Is there a more prevalent story going around in the NFL right now than DeAndre Hopkins and where he's going to play in the 2023 NFL season? I personally believe that in the next few weeks, and as we get even closer to training camp and the start of the NFL regular season, that all the rumors and news and all the other information surrounding DeAndre Hopkins will become even more prevalent. And in my opinion, it still makes a ton of sense why he's still a huge hot commodity at this point, especially of the free agent market. He's debatably the best overall player left on the free agent market. Still in his prime, he's about to turn 31 in just a couple of days, and I don't see DeAndre Hopkins as a top 5 wide receiver anymore, even probably a top 10 wide receiver. But does he still have the capabilities to be a number 1 wide receiver for multiple teams in the NFL and bring a lot of value to almost any team? Definitely, and I think that's why there's so many teams interested in his services for this upcoming season. He does need to get a bit more on track. He hasn't had a great season in the past 2 years. He dealt with a suspension for PEDs this past year, and he dealt with some injuries back in 2021. So he hasn't went over 1,000 yards and made a Pro Bowl since 2020 when he went over 1,400 total yards. So I think that's a whole nother piece of this DeAndre Hopkins drama and news regarding him and where he's going to play next year. If you're a team that is in desperate need of a wide receiver 1, can you truly rely on DeAndre Hopkins to be available and be able to play all 17 games and be a top echelon wide receiver? That's an interesting debate that I'm willing to have, but I do think that most of the teams that Hopkins is wanting to go to don't really need him to be the bona fide wide receiver 1 for the team. The 2 popular names I've seen thrown around for DeAndre Hopkins are the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills have Stephon Diggs, who is better than DeAndre Hopkins at this stage of their careers. They drafted a tight end in the first round in Dalton Kincaid. They still have Gabe Davis. They still have Dawson Knox. They don't desperately need DeAndre Hopkins to step in and be an over 1,000-yard receiver for them. And in the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think they have as many weapons as the Buffalo Bills, but they have Patrick Mahomes, and we saw last year how effective he was with not a lot of great receiving threats. They traded away Tyreek Hill. They did not want to pay him over $100 million because they have a lot of other cap restraints on their team, but they recouped a ton of assets for him. They invested those in a ton of wide receivers the past couple of years. Sky Moore in the draft. They traded for Kadarius Toney. They also went out in free agency and got Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and then in the second round of this year's draft, they drafted Rashee Rice out of SMU. And then on top of that, of course, they have one of the best tight ends of all time in Travis Kelce. So how much more resources are the Chiefs really willing to pour into their wide receiving core, knowing that DeAndre Hopkins wants a pretty decent sum of money? And you combine that with the fact that the Bills have less than $1.4 million in cap space, while the Chiefs only have less than $1 million. So there's not a ton of cap maneuvering that these teams can do, especially at this stage of the offseason, to create cap to pay DeAndre Hopkins. I think if DeAndre Hopkins wanted to take a pay cut and the Chiefs really wanted to make it work and sign him, I think they had the flexibility to be able to do so. The contract with Patrick Mahomes that he signed a couple of years ago, that 10-year, $500 million deal, it gives the team a lot of flexibility to move things around, push some money down the road a little bit. Whereas the Bills, who just paid Stephon Diggs a relatively new contract, they paid a lot of money to Von Miller this past offseason, and they still owe Josh Allen a lot of money. His contract cap hit is increasing rapidly each year. So personally, with all the reports that have come out saying that DeAndre Hopkins does want a pretty good contract similar to the one that Odell Beckham Jr. got from the Ravens this offseason, and the amount of cap that those teams have to spend, I just do not see it as a likely scenario that DeAndre Hopkins ends up with either the Bills or the Chiefs. So a team that I think DeAndre Hopkins would want to play for, that they can afford him and it would be a great fit, is actually the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I know without going into the details of why I think it's a good fit, this may sound a little bit silly, but the Dallas Cowboys have the 7th most cap space in the NFL with $20 million. They're a Super Bowl contender in the NFC. They made a lot of moves this offseason to improve their team, getting Stephon Gilmore on defense and then Brandon Cooks as well on the offensive end. I think right now CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks is a really nice wide receiver duo. Brandon Cooks has been one of the most underrated wide receivers his entire career, but in his career he's been mainly used as a deep threat, and I think that's what the Cowboys are going to mainly use him for as well. But if you bring in DeAndre Hopkins and you put him on one side, CeeDee Lamb on the other side, and then put Brandon Cooks in the slot, I think you have the best wide receiver trio in the NFL. So with the overall talent on the roster and where the organization currently is, with Jerry Jones kind of getting up there in age and wanting to win another Super Bowl before he has to give up ownership of the team, I think this is the type of move that can push the Cowboys ahead of teams like the Eagles and the 49ers in the NFC. I think at this point we know what Dak Prescott is. He's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's not in the tier of the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allen, the Joe Burrows, but he's definitely good enough to bring your team success. He's definitely good enough to bring your team to a Super Bowl, and he's at his best when he has a lot of talent on the outside he can kind of distribute the ball to. So with DeAndre Hopkins on the market, still one of the best receivers in the league, why not go out there and acquire him? The Cowboys executive vice president and son of Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, was asked about DeAndre Hopkins and if the Cowboys had any interest whatsoever, and he said he's not on this team right now. We went down the road with Brandon Cooks. We're very comfortable with Cooks. We're really pleased with our receiving group, and I can't really argue that. I already mentioned some of the wide receivers in their wide receiver core. They have Brandon Cooks. They have CeeDee Lamb. They paid a lot of money to Michael Gallup last offseason. He dealt with a lot of injuries this past year, but Can he kind of bounce back and become a really big piece of the offense? And then on top of that, the Cowboys also have a lot of players that they're going to have to pay in the upcoming offseason. CeeDee Lamb's contract is up. Trayvon Diggs' contract is up. So I can understand why they would want to keep some cap space, roll it over to 2024, and then pay some of their own players. But I was just thinking about this DeAndre Hopkins situation, how everybody is pointing towards the Bills and the Chiefs and some other random teams, maybe like the Lions or the Jets. And nobody's really talking about the Dallas Cowboys and how well he would actually fit on that team and how much better he could actually make their offense. But even Mike McCarthy kind of echoed what Stephen Jones said in his press conference. He said, "I really like our group," when he was asked about Hopkins himself. He said, "There's nothing good that comes out of those answers. Hop is a hell of a talent." But I still believe in my heart of hearts that if the Cowboys really want to eclipse the top teams in the NFC last year and the Eagles and the 49ers, their defense was good enough against the 49ers to win that game in the divisional round this past playoffs. It was their offense that struggled, and they're relatively bringing back the same pieces from that season. I know Ezekiel Elliott is gone now. I know Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator. He's also gone now. But contrary to what a lot of people said about Kellen Moore, I was actually a pretty big fan of what he was able to do with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense. He practically had them as a top 5 scoring offense every year. And was that because of the talent that they had on the team? Was it because of his coaching and what he got out of them? I think it was a combination of both. I think the Cowboys have some good players, but I also think that Kellen Moore's scheme and his play calling was also pretty effective. So them getting rid of him, I think, is really interesting, and we're going to see if that game will kind of plays off with now giving the reins to Mike McCarthy and having him call plays and him running his offense. McCarthy has said many times he wants to run the ball a lot more, that Kellen Moore was just about scoring points and putting up some good fantasy numbers, trying to pass the ball all the time. Well, we'll see if McCarthy is right and if he can get that offense even more effective, especially in the postseason. But the caveat to that is the running backs that he has on the roster. Ezekiel Elliott, as I mentioned, is not on the team anymore. They got rid of him. Tony Pollard now is coming off of a broken leg. How effective is he going to be right away when he comes back from that injury? So in my opinion, that's another good reason why getting DeAndre Hopkins could help out the offense and kind of jumpstart it as we start the season. And on top of that, he would also be a really important piece to help out Dak Prescott, who may be the most important player on the entire Cowboys team. If Prescott is really good and returns to his 2021 form or his 2019 form, the Cowboys could be a really, really scary team. Last year, getting hurt early, I think kind of messed up his entire season. He was not super great last year, probably his worst season as a pro overall. He was tied for the 6th highest turnovers out of any quarterback last year with 16, which is not good when you factor in that he missed 5 games. So he's definitely gonna have to be able to take care of the ball more, and I think getting DeAndre Hopkins will definitely help with that. But at this point, I don't think it's likely that the Cowboys will try to go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, but I definitely think that it's a move that they should look into making, and ultimately, if the price is right, make the move. But let me know what you think about DeAndre Hopkins and where you think he will end up before the 2023 season starts. And also let me know if you think the Dallas Cowboys should go after him or if they should use their resources in other places. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.